Thank you very much. Good evening. It's great to be here. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you our findings, and we're glad that you're here to hear them. We wanted to start by maybe saying just a little bit more about ourselves very quickly, and then we'll jump right in. My name is Michael Moore. I graduated in May from the University of Akron with a degree in corporate financial management. Currently, I'm working at a company called AML RightSource, doing compliance analysis for AML and BSA programs.
Hi, my name is Jeff Kelbach. I was an economics major at the University of Akron, graduated in May of this year, and currently work as a portfolio hedging analyst for First Energy in Akron, Ohio, and was lucky enough to stumble upon this competition and happy with the work we produced.
Hi, my name is Kenan Sprague, and I actually will be graduating from the University of Akron in May of 2018, so right at the end of the tunnel, and I look forward to working in the financial services field after I graduate.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacob Ruscio-Cole, and I'm a media studies major at the University of Akron, and I helped out with the video. Made it good. That's what I think.
Should I introduce myself? I'm Banu Balasubramanian, Associate Professor in the University of Akron.
And I'm Chuck Stelarowski, the CEO of People's Bank.
So one thing I will point out before we begin is that none of us majored in banking. None of us have even had a class in banking. So this was very much a learning experience for us. We're blessed to have done as well as we did. With that being said, we relied very heavily on Dr. B, as we call her. We relied very heavily on her. We would not be here today if it weren't for her. And we also relied very heavily on People's Bank, the executives that are there, including Mr. Solariski, who's here today. But there were a number of other executives who helped us along the way. Not only did we interview Chuck, but we also interviewed the CFO, John Rogers. We interviewed the CCO, Robin Stevens. We interviewed Matt Edgel, the Director of Human Resources, and then Sandra Kesterson really did a lot of the groundwork for making that possible. So we're appreciative of that, and we'd like to start by thanking them. With that being said, we'll have Kenan tell you a little bit more about People's Bank and jump right in.
So a few things that are on this slide were already mentioned in the video. People's Bank was founded in 1902, which incidentally is actually the same year the Conference of State Bank Supervisors was founded. And as we mentioned, it's located on the corner of the Ohio and Muskingum rivers. So it sort of serves as a gateway between the Ohio Valley and the Appalachian area. It also holds $3.5 billion in assets currently, and is $3 under Chuck's management, and has the distinction of surviving, as we mentioned, both the Great Depression and the Great Recession. In terms of how we became connected with People's Bank, we had the good fortune of sending 3 other students under the guidance of Dr. B to compete in a case competition that they sponsored, which those students had the good fortune of winning. That helped sort of grease the wheels for when this question came up of what banks may be willing to participate in this case study with us. So that helped form that relationship. So I'll turn it over to Jeff now, who will tell you a bit more about their geographic footprint.
All right, so as mentioned, People's Bank, located in the southeastern corner of Ohio. Small city of just about over 14,000 people, and as seen on the map above, their presence mainly lies in Ohio, a little bit in northern area of states West Virginia and Kentucky. So mostly centered around this Marietta region, which next slide you'll see how rural compared to these other metropolitan areas it is. But also we do see some presence in bigger cities, Dayton and Cincinnati areas, Columbus areas, branch presence, and also Northeast Ohio around the Cleveland and Akron area. And here, this slide, just to get familiar with kind of more about the area, Parkersburg, Marietta, MSA, quite small fraction of the population compared to some of these other bigger cities in Ohio, up to 1 to 2 hours away. So this area that People's Bank operates in is one of kind of lower educational attainment, higher poverty, higher unemployment rates. So in some ways, it can be difficult to attain some of this talent and succession planning that the bank wants to succeed in the future. But as we'll see, and I think Chuck has showed us that People's Bank has shown the ability to grow and keep a good standing as a community bank and provided us with some good material.
So a little bit of background on the financial performance of People's Bank, starting with kind of their overarching strategy, which is organic growth internally paired with external acquisitions. That has become more and more relevant since Mr. Solariski arrived at the bank. Noting in our conversations with him that revenue retention for acquisitions is somewhere in the neighborhood of 97%, while costs are cut by about 40%. That has really been the key factor in their recent success. There have been 6 acquisitions by the company since Mr. Solariski arrived in 2011, adding nearly $1.3 billion in assets to the company. 88% of that was in 14 and 15, the cost associated with which was part of the reason why that line behind me is down in those years. With that being said, those acquisitions also led to revenue records for the company in 2016. Those acquisitions paired with internal loan growth in the neighborhood of 9.3% and revenue growth in the neighborhood of 7.5%. To speak a little bit about their loan portfolio, they have decreased their holdings in commercial and industrial loans since 2008, as has just about every bank, from about 48% to what stands right about now at 37%. Those percentages have gone into consumer loans and commercial and industrial loans to offset those. Another thing that makes People's Bank unique is that they have a higher emphasis on fee-based income than most banks. They have a current fee-based income of about 32%. They target to be between 35 and 40%, which is significantly higher than the peer group average for banks their size, which is around 24%. And probably the biggest strength of People's Bank is their asset quality and their capital position. Mr. Solariski noted that was the thing that really drew him to People's Bank, was being able to have some money to play with, and Robin Stevens attributed that to being how they were able to survive not only the Great Depression, but the Great Recession as well. So now Jeff is going to talk a little bit more about how those things and leadership changes has impacted their performance.
All right. So another part of this competition was to conduct like a correlation analysis, and I guess I might add that this is an undergraduate correlation regression analysis after following up some of the papers we heard before that were just great to hear and high-level research. But this correlation regression analysis we looked at data from 1990 to 2016 about leadership changes and trying to tie those into impact on the bank's position and its performance. So I guess our goal coming into this was really to try to provide some statistical evidence of that board and leadership changes do have an impact on some of the specific numbers at People's Bank. And really we wanted to kind of tie some numbers into an otherwise hard to quantify topic of succession planning. And we looked at some of the past research too to kind of give us some guidelines that these past research have stated that board independence and composition and even size sometimes do not have an impact on the bank's performance, or if it does, that this impact is pretty negligible in some instances. So outlined here is kind of the two models that we set up. On your left, you'll see some of the variables we accounted for, GDP growth, trying to look for accounting for the fact that in the higher periods of growth, some of these banks, we would expect for them to perform better. Also intangible assets, hoping to include and capture things such as customer relationships and intangibles such as technology, but also maybe kind of misinterpreted due to a recent level of mergers and acquisitions in the past few years. So going over some of our results, some of it was consistent with some of our research. The CEO variables in both models were significant, although in different directions, maybe suggesting different impacts on different measures. But also looking at CFO, significant in some cases, but the only thing, board of directors, insignificant, which would suggest on the research something that maybe we expected to see. And obviously in this study, obviously some limitations with some, we'd like to have a lot more years of study and perhaps even look in the future, if we were to do this again, about more banks all across the country as opposed to just focusing down to one.
So getting into the board composition, which we would like to highlight here as a strength of People's Bank, there's essentially two facts I'd really like to highlight here. And that's, first of all, that while we weren't able to interview their board, there was a lot of publicly accessible information which was also used in our regression analysis that Jeff just mentioned. But they have a very highly diverse board. As Chuck mentioned in the video, there are 4 females on the board, which represents nearly a third of the board, which is currently 13 members. It's also highly diverse in terms of the skills available. There are physicians, attorneys, and also former public accountants on the board. And that really helps to guide them as a community bank by having such a diverse board. In terms of their current succession plan, as mentioned, the emphasis is on internal development, on bringing skills to the table from local hires, and then supplementing where appropriate with external hires. Which brings us to their current professional development program, which is a rotational program where candidates rotate through different departments for approximately 2 years, and then they end up essentially in a permanent role. Unfortunately, there's no current written talent management program, which is our primary recommendation, that this identification process for highly talented candidates begins earlier, and then they are funneled into that process as quickly as possible. We do want to emphasize, however, that this professional development program is highly valuable, which, as you can see here, this graph is from a Gallup poll, which was published by the Harvard Business Review. And I want to draw your attention to the factor at the top of the slide, which is the opportunity to learn and grow. There's 3 different generational echelons shown here, or cohorts: baby boomers in blue, Generation Xers in green, and millennials in orange. As you can see on that factor named opportunity to learn and grow, millennials place a vastly higher emphasis on the opportunity to learn and grow. So this is a very valuable, an important component of People's Bank succession planning, and we believe that it's a very successful thing that they should continue to do. So moving into the C-suite and board succession planning, literature does suggest that internal hires are more common and on the aggregate do tend to perform better, which aligns with their current strategy, which we recommend that they continue to do. External hires can be beneficial, but we also recommend that the formalized process for the board succession plan be extended to their C-suite executives as well. We also recommend that they continue to diversify the board, which can be at a capacity of up to 15 members according to their articles, particularly in the area of IT background and knowledge. So now I'll turn it over to Jake, who will tell us a bit about the video production process.
So, some of the challenges for creating, a video is logistics of what goes into making it. So, my amazing team here helps tremendously with finding out and scheduling when the meeting times were and the best way to approach interviewing these fine figures of the bank. One other challenge that I should say, or a few different challenges I should say, being conscious of everyone's schedule is a very demanding task for if you're trying to get a video completely done and have it look as good as you want it to be. For interviews, you only get one take, such as our 8:30 a.m. to noon that we interviewed them. We couldn't go back for reshoots, or we couldn't be like, hey, cut, say that again. Exactly. So as the time's running out, I'd like to actually get over to the bonus video. And this is actually an overview of the timeline for the video that you saw for the Akron. So this is just the different clips, the different snippets, the sound, everything that goes into it, the color grading, etc. It looks like a daunting task. The hours of editing that went into it was about 10, 11-ish hours of straight editing, but it was fun. I liked it. So, yeah, we'll go over to the bonus video.
Fast forward. Fast forward.
I have a contrarian point of view. Most people that do what I do really despise the regulators. If you look at what do the regulators want, they're safe and sound, and they want the customer not to be screwed. To me, entry-level stakes. I mean, I think that we are a lot less adversarial with the regulators than some banks. I've been in conferences where, bank CEO will talk about how when the regulators come, they put them in the darkest corner of the bank and turn up the heat. And I'm like, why would you want to piss people off? So they have a job to do. They're professional. They don't, they want to make sure you're doing things the right way. And so. They've been supportive of us in doing acquisitions. They've been helpful, to us, and occasionally they point out things that we need to do better. And that's not a bad, thing. There's the diversity and the complexity of these, bank is very high. So having another set of eyes look at it, I'm all for. We view them almost like clients. We proactively call them every quarter and try to pick their brains.
Rotation type role within the bank, so they rotate through the different departments and end up in a permanent role. And then after they're in that permanent role, they've moved into different and higher levels throughout the bank. So I think we really strive to promote from within. So I think it's good for the bank, and Peoples is an advocate of that.
One of the things we're passionate about as an organization is giving back to the communities. I don't know how much time you guys have spent in southeastern Ohio in our markets, Kentucky, West Virginia. They're some pretty depressed markets, just to be honest with you. I say that because we can make a meaningful difference in those communities. You look at some of the highest poverty rates in the U.S. That's where we're banking at. So we don't take that responsibility lightly. We know that we can take $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, which may not be a huge amount to the company, and give it back to a community, to help with hunger, to help with things like that, and it can really change people's lives. We aspire to be the best community bank in America, and part of that in our industry is continuous growth in size. Okay, and why I say that's it's a challenge is because as you grow bigger, keeping those elements that make you a community bank and make you relevant in those communities, it's not easy.